Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, first part for the 20th of April 2024. I'm genuinely excited today because I think a bill will pass. I've just heard that Chuck Schumer, the majority Senate leader for the Democrats, has said to the senators, because what's going to happen is that I think the bills will pass because all the rules have been sorted out. They're now just going to be voted on, I gather, tonight or today in the House of Representatives, which is the lower house. 438 odd representatives from both parties will be voting on that. I think Ukraine aid will pass quite easily, and all of those bills, if they all pass, will go to the Senate, where I think the idea is they're going to be wrapped up into one bill, and the Senate is going to vote on that. And so Chuck Schumer said, please work this weekend. We've got work to do, senators. We need to stay around to vote on these bills that are coming through from the House of Representatives because they need to be expedited. People, the responsible lawmakers, recognize that Ukraine needs stuff now, like now. And what I understand is that the White House has said this. Karine Jean-Pierre, the spokeswoman for the White House, has said that they're ready to go, as in the military is ready to go, as in logistically speaking, as soon as that vote goes through, you will get, my guess is that they've probably got an awful lot of kit in Germany, Poland, that's just been shipped over, possibly, maybe not, but possibly a bunch of kit ready to go in Europe, not just in the United States. And as soon as that vote goes through, it's over the border and into Ukraine. I think this is going to be just a massive bit of a game changer, certainly locally, as in temporally locally to right now. Suddenly there's going to be a lot of kit. We've just heard, I mean, it's my next, I don't want, I'll talk about it in my next video, which is the military aid video, because there's a lot of good news possibly coming out today. Right. So that is going to be an incredibly important weekend. I'll try and keep you updated as much as I can. It's Saturday, things are happening, you know, in my own personal life and whatnot. So I'll try and get you the information as and when I can. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below. 750 personnel, pretty much where it was yesterday. It's a slight downtick from what we have seen over the last week or so. 8 tanks, 21 APVs and 20 artillery systems. Fairly useful numbers there for the Ukrainians in attriting the Russian mechanized capabilities. It's not the highest numbers in any of those categories, but you know, fairly useful though. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 46 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 3 pieces of special equipment. Fairly good day at the office, but I think weather has been keeping activity a little bit sort of down key. I'm going to repeat what I said the last few days. I just think that the Russians are running out of steam in a number of places along the front, or generally all across the front line, and therefore concentrating on just a small number of hotspots. I don't know if that's a sign of their overall capacity or lack of capacity, or whether they're starting to hold things back for a future offensive. Obviously, those are two very different scenarios. Now, Andrew Perpetua, just in general, like talking about how much data he has to deal with on a daily basis. The guy is getting not nearly enough sleep. Last summer, we were averaging like 140 video clips per day. So 140 clips per day. After we broke down from the full videos, a video might have 10, for example, today. So that's like 14 videos. Today we have 182 videos, not clips, videos. 702 clips so far, more to come. God damn, I miss sleep. I remember when we first had like 350 video clips, and I was like, oh my God, this is insane. And now I wish for 350 again. The amount of data coming out, I think, shows a huge uptick in the use of drones. I mean, that is fairly obvious now. We recognise that as the war's gone on, they're just getting more and more drones are being used, and more drones are being used effectively as both sides adapt and improve. We are seeing so many more first-person view drones, but also IED dropping drones and reconnaissance drones, of course, but things like Baba Yaga, octocopters that are now being used far more widely. So the amount of footage that these open source intelligence people have to go through, like Andrew is an absolute trooper, and his team. And if you have the time and the wherewithal to help his team out, he is basically advertising for people to help him. It is having to do things by the book. You have to do things exactly how they want it done, because it needs to be comparable data. There needs to be absolute consistency. So it is quite robotic work, but if you're cool with that, if you kind of like that, and if you are up for helping, please reach out to Andrew Perpetua and his guys like Gick and Dirk and whatnot, and help them out, because they have so much work to do. Now, here is the fruit of their labour, and certainly from the last 24 hours, we have a smaller list of kit. We've had some days where it's just been stupendous. This is much smaller, and we're looking like a 2.5, 3, or 3-to-1 ratio of Russian to Ukrainian losses, but far fewer losses overall. Still, we'll have a look at the value of this stuff. The Ukrainians, nothing really speaks out there, just usual pieces of equipment, electronic warfare, undisclosed electronic warfare, bit of kit, some tanks, SPGs, but they're obviously so blown up that you don't know what they are. Humvee, so nothing particularly worrying there. Interesting though that Lancets are being used to take out most of those. So I think that is something that is incredibly significant, which means this kit. So part of the reason why the Russians are not destroying as much Ukrainian stuff is because the Ukrainians are on the defensive, and being on the defensive, they do their work predominantly in fortification, so in trench lines, and the Russians are attacking those trench lines. And the Ukrainians are not using equipment because they know that the closer you bring equipment to the front line, the more likely it is to get blown up by first-person view drones. So there is a bit of a selection bias, not a selection bias. I mean, that's your explanation why they're not losing as much kit as the Russians, because they just don't. Well, if they do have the kit, it's way behind, waiting for a future offensive. So then when you do get kit blown up, I think it's interesting now that you're seeing a lot more Lancets. Lancets would be, with their much greater range, bigger drones, not your little quadcopters with a RPG warhead attached to it and then flung at something. These Lancet drones with their X-wings have a much greater range. So it might be 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers behind a line. So if that's taking out a self-propelled gun or a tank, those are probably tanks that aren't being used on the front line to do any attacking, I would have thought. And these are ones that are maybe stored further behind. There's complete speculation here. But the fact that you're seeing so many Lancets now, that Lancets would normally attack things like air defense systems, or even airframes like MiG-29s. We've seen them attack at Mykolaiv and whatnot. So the fact that they're using Lancets for these targets means, I think, that there is a lack of mechanized equipment much closer to the front line. For the Russians here, we've got the Tu-22 M3 that's now been confirmed to have been taken down by an S-200 missile system, which is interesting. Using that to strike 350 kilometers away is very, very useful for the Ukrainians. 3 electronic warfare pieces of equipment, pieces of electronic warfare equipment, a couple of surveillance comms and engineering vehicle, a couple of bits of artillery, nothing too great. T-90 destroyed. Interesting, and I've seen the footage of that, walking around that tank. They are losing a number of T-90s. I'd be really interested to know what the estimation is for their stocks of T-90s now. That's their best tank, but they only started the war with 100 T-90Ms, the M variant, and they had lost a good over half of those, I think. But they are still making them as well, so I'd just like to know where they are with those. Infantry fighting vehicles, a number of these destroyed and abandoned, BMP 1s, 2s, 3s, BTRs, and then a number of trucks and civilian vehicles and whatnot. So I guess if you add that to Tu-22 M3, that is a huge loss for the Russians. T-90M, depends how valuable the electronic warfare equipment is, or whether it's just a small bit of kit. But yeah, there is a massive kit for the Russians that they've lost, which means that overall it's a bad day at the office for the Russians, and the Ukrainians have done okay. Okay, moving on. This gives you an indication of of the sheer volume of bits of kit that are being lost. So these are Russian losses by Novomakilivka, and as Andrew Perpetua says, this is insanity, and he's someone that has been compiling the data for these losses. I don't know. I don't know that it's using his data. It might be. Who knows? But here's someone who has put together this video of all the Russian losses, and then shows you videos of them, and destroyed bits of kit, etc., etc. And the dots just keep getting added to the map, to the point where, okay, that's 45, okay, 50, goodness me, 50, that's a lot of kit lost by Novomakilivka, so on and so forth. This video then goes on until you get to the end of the video. Oh my goodness, right, 312. They have lost 312 bits of kit in the Novomakilivka area. Sorry about that, I just blew my own ears out. Because that's how Twitter videos work. So 312 bits of equipment destroyed by Novomakilivka is incredible. So we can go back and look at these stats and wonder whether they are accurate, but just in one place you've got 312 Russian bits of kit destroyed. It's just insane, absolutely insane, and that is confirmed losses. Right, we're going to go on to look at a few individuals who have perished recently over the last few days. So as a result of the strike on Luhansk, I don't even remember, there was a Storm Shadow strike on Luhansk, the city of Luhansk, somewhere there. Didn't really hear about what it was. The idea was as command and control, I think. Anyway, a colonel of the Central Military District and commander of the 59th Brigade was eliminated in that strike on Luhansk. So Storm Shadow missile doing its job there in taking out key military infrastructure. Then Russian reporter reveals the details of the murder of Russell Texas Bentley. So Russell Bentley is this American who has been fighting for the Russians since 2014, right? And then went missing. Then there were claims that his body had been found and he's been decapitated. There were all different claims and no one really knows what's going on. Anyway, he's an American defector who's been in the so-called DPR since 2014. After successful shelling by Ukrainian defense forces of a facility housing the 5th Tank Brigade in Donetsk on April the 8th, Bentley, who was 64 at the time of his death, arrived at the scene and was apprehended, kidnapped and murdered on suspicion of espionage by disgruntled Russian servicemen. So here is an American who has just kind of lost the plot and been fighting for the Russians since 2014, turns up another place to help out, and they think he's an American spy, or spying for the Ukrainians or whatever, and is apprehended and then basically killed. The most likely was that they were angry at his accent and thought he was a spy. The search for Bentley lasted over a week, with many mill bloggers asking for any information on his whereabouts. So that is the Russians, I guess, shooting themselves in the foot. To some degree. And then there's Z YouTuber Misha from Canada, who was known for his live streams where he used to say how great Russia was, but he's now died. He was killed on a motorcycle accident, a motorcycle crash, I presume it's an accident, in Crimea, rather than in a combat zone. However, he left behind 126,000 YouTube subscribers. So that's, a site that's a good 3 times bigger than my channel. So not to say my channel is relatively small, but here's a decent audience he has. How many of them are bots and trolls, I don't know. But, quite a big player suddenly dying in Crimea. Then we have propagandist Sladkov being furious after the death of a military correspondent, scare quotes, Semyon Eremin, due to a Ukrainian FPV drone. I've never seen him like this, says War Translated's Dmitry before. As a rule, he follows the official line. However, he is dissatisfied with the attitude towards military reporters who are not considered participants of hostilities with all that entails. Lack of payments and benefits to the family. That is, Sladkov directly states that all Russian, scare quotes, journalists should be considered competents. Semyon Eremin, a propagandist for pro-Kremlin Izvestia media outlet, illegally crossed the border into Ukraine, where he was killed in the Zaporizhia region. He constantly hung around the contact line, covering events in the war since February 2022. His car was attacked by an FPV drone, and he died from his injuries. Sladkov is likely very worried about his own ass. After all, he has been successfully running away from fate for a very long time. There was another reporter killed in Crimea just recently as well. Apparently shouldn't have been where he was, ended up in, fully in a war zone and getting shelled and killed. There seems to be a lot of these sorts of people falling by the wayside for the Russians at the moment, and some dissatisfaction with that situation from Sladkov, who's a major player. Last night in Ukraine, unknown persons shot officers in the Vinnytsia region. So this is a real shame that 2 police officers stopped an unknown dark-coloured car for inspection, and then one police officer, a 20-year-old one, was killed, and the partner was injured as 2 men from the car opened fire on police. So, could they be Russian agents of some variety operating, clandestinely? Could there have been some kind of Russian assets, or was this just Ukrainian criminals? Who knows? But sad news for the police there. In occupied Kakhovka on the left bank, there's a big fire starting. I haven't put this under distance munitions. I think this looks like probably general shelling, but something decent has been hit there, as in one presumes there's a lot of oil smoke. It looks to be kicking out, billowing out from some target hit near the front line there. And here we have confirmation that, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, so that's Budanov, details how the Tu-22 M3 bomber that was taken out recently was taken out by an S-200 missile. The Soviet-era S-200 long-range surface-to-air missile system has a range of up to 300 kilometers. In Ukraine, having 4 S-200 batteries and 12 static launch sites, the S-200 was retired in 2013. So this is an old bit of kit, Soviet-era bit of kit. If you're thinking S-300, S-400, now S-500 in prototype form, S-200 is pretty old, but it has been brought back, and one presumes adapted, because the strike was over 300 kilometers, it appears. And I think as a result, that's really good news for the Ukrainians if they can do that. General Budanov, head of the GUR, reaffirms that the Tu-22 was shot down at a distance of 308 kilometers, using the same means as we did with the A-50. So actually this is confirmation that the previous radar plane that was taken out, people were wondering whether that was a Patriot being moved down. Well, actually, if they can adapt old S-200s and bring them to near the front line and use them riskily to shoot down high-value assets like the A-50 and this Tu-22 M3, then that stops them using things like Patriots and putting them in harm's way, and they might lose the odd S-200 launcher. But I'll tell you what, that's a great return on investment, I would say. Preparation took us a week, he said. Some people saying he's lying about the distance. Actually, I would disagree with that. But then this is Aiden famously, this is a Russian, complete Russian propagandist. But I don't think he would be lying about that either, because it depends how you measured it. There were claims that it depends where the S-200 was positioned. So, you can't know that he's lying at all, because you don't know where the S-200 was. But also, I believe the plane was hit and then tried to limp back to, this is what the Russians claim, I think, tried to limp back to base, and then eventually fell out the sky on the way back there. So again, there's quite a lot of elbow room for the claim. Here we have him talking about it. I won't dip into that, but you can find parts of the interview with the BBC News Ukrainian, where he talks about waiting a long time, taking a long time to prepare, done with an S-200. So jobs are good. One thing I can tell you, hit the plane at a distance of 308 kilometers. That's far enough, he says, with his usual non-committal face. Let's just say that fruitful and long work makes itself. I didn't see the end of that, but you get the idea. Good news for the Ukrainians there, if they can use something like the S-200 to make deep strikes into Russian territory to hit high-value targets. Right, moving on to distance strikes. Odessa has been, before we move on to the vast amount of drones that were sent into Russia. So Ukraine did quite a lot last night. We'd start with the Russian strikes on Ukraine. and they have destroyed agricultural products that were headed from Odessa to Asia and Africa. Russian missile strike in the Odessa region destroyed containers with agricultural products that were supposed to be exported. Now, I hadn't heard too much detail on this other than that same kind of picture, but Jay in Kiev says that today Russians sent around $50 million of worth of missiles to Ukrainian ports in an effort to destroy containers of grain that were about to be shipped to Africa. Now, I don't know if that's like $50 million of missiles in total, like over the course of the war at these ports, or whether that literally yesterday, $50 million. But he says, remember, it was 9 months ago that Russia threatened to create a global food crisis by using their warships to blow up grain shipments on the Black Sea, but the Ukraine solved the problem by destroying 30% of Russia's Black Sea fleet. Now it's time to solve this problem by giving Ukraine a means to destroy Russia's fleet of bomber aircraft that terrorize not only Ukraine, but the stability of the world's food supplies. Absolutely. Now we're going to move on to what Ukraine did last night, which is potentially highly significant. There's still not all the news coming out about this. So the Russians are saying 50 drones attacked 8 Russian regions overnight, and they claim that all 50 drones were shot down. That's clearly not the case, as we would come to expect from the Russian claims. So at night, drones attacked Russian military facilities, although I've not seen any detail of that, and infrastructure facilities, says no reports. Energy infrastructure was damaged by debris in the Kaluga region. In the Bryansk region, a substation was attacked, and in the Smolensk region, a fire broke out at a local refinery. Actually, some of these were particularly significant. The Smolensk one, very much so. In fact, I don't know, but two pieces of infrastructure might have been hit in Smolensk. Yeah, so Russian Ministry of Defense claims everything was shot down. That's clearly not true. Russian MOD reported 50 drones shot down. The breakdown of the down drones is as follows: 26 over Belgorod, 10 over Bryansk, and 8 over Kursk. So those are 3 regions just over the border, north of Ukraine. 2 over the Tula region, just slightly further north of them. And then territories of Smolensk, Ryazan, Kaluga, and Moscow region. So all not too far from Moscow, I think, itself, as far as I remember my Russian geography. So yeah, being variously reported, a fire erupted from the attack in Istobnoye village in Belgorod Oblast. And yeah, all sorts of information coming out. Now, energy substation on fire in Vigonichi in Bryansk Oblast. Governor says 6 drones were downed over Bryansk. Fire started from a falling drone, just conveniently falling on the target, it appears. Now, I think this is more significant possibly than one might first realise. This is a substation in Russia's Novobryanskaya, in that one in Vigonichi. It's a 750 kilovolt substation, currently ablaze. And I think this is, some people are shouting about how, whoa, this is good. So as in, that's a really big piece of electricity infrastructure. After a drone attack, a substation in Vigonichi, Bryansk region caught fire. According to testimony of local residents, they shared videos on social networks. Before the fire, 5 to 6 explosions were heard. The air defense was operating in the air. But anyway, that is just, so we see this is Kyiv. This is up into Bryansk there, and quite a bit further back is not just your local substation. I presume that is a significant strike. Substation in Ufa has left the chat. They say there was a bang. So the PS01, I've not seen this elsewhere, but claims that there were 5 substations that have been destroyed. It's really hitting the energy infrastructure there, but certainly a number of different places. Kaluga region, Kursk nuclear power plant substation nearby hit there. Yeah, so are these different claims. Stary Oskol electrical substation. So they're going for these substations. So maybe there is 5 actually. I think he's at a detailed 5 there. And all the footage to go with that. So yeah, this is on the back of a massive attack by the enemy, say the Russians, last night. And it does seem like a wide-ranging attack. 50 unidentified drones, but I think the most significant, at least from what I can work out, is in Smolensk Oblast, where here we've got a Lukoil facility. Lukoil sent neft product syndicate, leading to a powerful fire in 2 locations. And the person on with a video camera saying this is, lots of swearing, but saying it's been properly hit. Oil infrastructure there. Anyway, yes. So I guess we'll get more information about these strikes as the day goes on. There's also just now there's been an explosion in occupied Donetsk city. Don't know what's been hit there, but something. It could well be. Donetsk is an interesting one. Depends where it is, because you can just about hit it with. Avdiivka salient being taken means it's a lot more difficult, but you can probably reach it with your longer range artillery pieces. But it's probably something like a HIMARS or Storm Shadow that would do something like that. I would have thought into Donetsk. Here we have the remains of it. This is, definitely in ATACMS, 100%. So Jankoy airfield that was hit the other night, where the S-400 radar system and other really important bits of kit were destroyed. That was definitely ATACMS. So it's interesting that it either kept these ATACMS to use, after not using them since they took out the 2 air bases at Berdyansk and in Luhansk, and then waiting all this time, or have they suddenly got hold of some ATACMS subsequently? I don't know. But there's now more and more footage coming out of the strike at Jankoy that shows that, those things properly are destroyed. Amazing precision in the destruction of the 4 S-400 systems at once in the airbase at Jankoy, says Dmitry from War Translated, occupied Crimea. Right on the money. So they did a good job with that. And then, if you remember, on the same day, there was a big container over the horizon radar system that was struck by possibly one of the planes that's been adapted and turned into a drone. Well, there's satellite imagery of that array of those big sort of antenna things. So Ukrainian forces appear to have struck and damaged one of the receiving antennas on Russia's only 29B6 container over the horizon radar. It's got a 3,000 kilometer range, located outside Kovilkino. Sentinel-2 imagery from earlier today shows a roughly 200 meter patch of scorched ground along the western antenna. Can't really tell what's actually happened to it, but there's certainly some evidence of a strike there. The container is aimed at providing long-distance airspace monitoring and ballistic missile detection. And that was struck on Wednesday, and there was footage of sort of smoke coming up from there, but it was far away from the actual target, so we don't know the exact details of that strike. And then we're going to go to talk about Dnipro. So Dnipro was struck yesterday, early yesterday. Was that even from the day before? Anyway, population of 1 million in Dnipro. Imagine hitting the center of Vilnius or Riga with 11 cruise missiles and 9 killer drones. So Dnipro was absolutely hammered, and it appears like it was predominantly civilian infrastructure that was targeted and hit. And the rescue operations end in Dnipro. 3 killed, 24 injured after a Russian missile attack. Search and rescue operations at the sites of the Russian missile attack on Dnipro conducted on April the 20th. So that it might have been subsequently hit or... No, concluded. Sorry, the attack wasn't conducted. The search and rescue is concluded there. So yeah, that was from the other day. So actually, we're going to just pop into that a little bit for the other bits and pieces here, and it's heartbreaking. So this is Svitlana from Dnipropetrovsk region, survived during the Russian missile attack. Her neighbours, including their 3 kids, didn't. Russia is a terrorist state. So there are differing numbers about how many perished in this, and it could be that 3 died in Dnipro city itself, but others died outside. And here's a woman just, and you look at the destruction behind, and these are just civilian houses. Nobody survived, all dead, and she's evidently, emotionally scarred. I got buried under the rubble, and I barely made it out, she says. I don't know what to say. It's scary. It's just very scary. You were in the room? Yes, I got buried under rubble to my waist, and then I barely crawled out there. Crawled out, and here they were already cleaning out the rubble. She says, a family lived nearby. Yep, 3 kids, their mum and grandma. 3 kids, their mum and a grandma. And she goes on to say nobody survived. All of them dead. So there you go. Here we have a heartbreaking footage of the ruins of a house where only a dog survived. Yesterday, Russia destroyed 4 private houses and damaged 30 more in Sinelnikove in Dnipropetrovsk region. The whole family of a 6-year-old boy was killed. His mother, grandmother, 14-year-old sister, and 8-year-old brother. So that's the people you were just hearing about. The boy is in hospital in serious condition. And there, look at that dog, just lost now. Owner's dead. Just heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. You know, the effect on people, on pets and animals, on the landscape, on the environment, on the economy, on the culture, on the history of all of these places. Russia is just doing horrific stuff. And here we've got another pet story here. It's not just the lives of people that filthy Russians are destroying, says Kyiv, so obviously very rhetorical there. It's animals, pets losing their lives, owners, homes. My 2 dogs were also gone for 2 weeks after a missile strike. Thankfully, they were found later far away, says Kyiv about his own dogs. Here, similar story about Rex from Kharkiv. So this is a story about a dog who's, well, we'll just pop into this. So Rex's owner, an elderly man, was injured. I think was taken to hospital, and then the dog was, I think, still in the house. And anyway, you know, it's just this. It's just so you can go and find the story out at Jenkins' handle, and then that dog was reconciled with owners who had known that dog, you know, since their childhood or whatever, since they were younger. That dog had been with them, and anyway, just, you know, sad, of course. Look at the sadness in the dog's eyes. But yeah, these kind of stories are 10 a penny, so sadly happening all the time. People are dying, losing their family, pets are dying, or pets are the only thing left from families being killed or injured, taken to hospital. Right, moving on. I found this particularly interesting. I often talk to you all the time. I talk to you about concentrating on little things. What do they tell you? Now, we know that in some of the Baltic nations, drunk drivers are having their cars confiscated so that the cars can be sent to Ukraine to help the Ukrainian armed forces. And that's a good way of being able to, you know, do your law enforcement, confiscate things and put them to good use and to help out Ukraine. So, of course, Ukraine's in desperate situations, and we all know that. But the fact that they're doing this inside Russia now shows that Russia is indeed in a desperate situation too, or that their armed forces are. So in Russia, cars are confiscated from drunk drivers for military needs. A resident of the town of Kunga received an administrative penalty for repeated driving, and his Nissan Tirana was seized and handed over to representatives of the Russian ministry for, quote, sending it to the needs of the special military operation. And although you might think, yeah, that's good and it's fine, yeah, by all means do that. There's no criticism of that system, but it's like you would only need to do that in Russia if you were desperate for vehicles, and if you know, Russia are suffering as a result of what the Ukrainians are doing. 46 vehicles and fuel tanks taken out yesterday. That's just one day. Yeah, you're going to need vehicles to replace those that are attrited away. And then another sort of look at Russian artillery. There is this idea that they are firing 10 to 1 Russian to Ukrainian, and I'm sure that's the case. But I also think the Russians are struggling themselves, and which is why they're going to get everything they can from the North Koreans. They've supposedly now shipped over, 7,000 plus containers full of, one thinks, ammunition, predominantly artillery ammunition. Russia claim they are ramping up and should be making 2.1 million artillery rounds this year. I don't know whether that includes mortar rounds, because that changes things significantly. But if they are using rusty old bits of artillery ammunition like this, then I think all is not well for the Russians in terms of their own artillery ammunition stockpiles. Russian artillerymen preparing rusty 152mm artillery shells for firing, says Status 6 Military and Conflict News there. Okay, so that's enough from me. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.